they're now talking about a joint ruble, yuan, gold, um, new currency, BRICS currency.
In this interview, Alastair Macleod discusses the potential formation of a new BRICS currency backed by gold, rubles, and yuan. He explains that many countries interested in joining BRICS are cautious due to their debt in US dollars and past American interventions when nations resisted US economic policies. However, US sanctions on Russia have pushed some countries toward China's economic support. China has been stockpiling gold since the 1980s, preparing for a future where the dollar's influence might weaken. Russia is also working to create a stable gold-backed ruble. Macleod believes this shift could help BRICS nations become less dependent on the dollar and strengthen their own economies, although challenges remain.
Yeah, I think the first thing we have to understand is that a lot of the countries which have expressed an interest in joining BRICS owe money in dollars. And traditionally, they've been concerned about American action if they don't fall in line with American economic policy, if they show themselves to be rebelling against it. Too often, we've had situations where, as the Chinese put it, the Americans go in and pump and dump. You know, they get someone into debt, and then they raise the rates on them, and and screw them. And the other thing, of course, is regime change. So all these countries are walking a very, very delicate diplomatic tightrope. They're being very careful about what they're doing. So they can't just say, well, we're going to join the BRICS bloc. We're just going to go in and we're going to get rid of the dollar. We're going to work towards that and so on. No, because that is too dangerous. But we now have a momentum, which is actually the result of sanctions against Russia. There is now a momentum of countries who are moving away from the Russian sphere of influence, Russian hegemony, if you like, towards the attractions of particularly Chinese-led arrangement, association, because China has the surpluses, has the ability to invest, do joint ventures and all the rest of it. Whereas we've never actually done that. What we've done is we've tried to bribe people in order to stay on side. So we've corrupted regimes. Now, speaking as someone who's born and brought up in Africa and therefore has followed African politics to a degree, I think Africa as a whole is actually evolving away from that sort of situation. And, in my ex-country, as it were, the Chinese are building a new railway from the coast, not stopping at Kampala, which is where the lunatic express, which we built, stops, but actually going on into the Congo. So, this is, there's no doubt about it that this is going to facilitate the export of ore bodies of all sorts of things, from, cobalt and copper and, everything, absolutely everything. So, but this is while the ordinary African, I think there is a cultural problem, if you like, on the ground. But as far as the politicians are concerned, this is the way they're going to get the communications into their country to propel it into an industrial revolution, such as we had in the 19th century. And that is really what it's all about. So, you've been frightened of getting away from America because you might get punished for doing that. But now you've got the attraction of the development of your country in a really positive way. And dare you be left out of that? So you can see how this is sort of swinging. And I'm sorry to say, but I think it's US foreign policy which has actually mainly driven this. They've got wrong-footed on the whole issue, and consequently, I can see this drift continuing. Now, you mentioned the meeting in Kazan in a couple of weeks' time. This is extremely important. It certainly is. Yeah. So this meeting in Kazan is very, very important, and it's actually a subject which I'm writing about for my Thursday article. And this Thursday article, I'm looking at, the, if you like, the geopolitics behind it, but also the vexed question of doing away with the dollar, which is really the topic which I think you're really interested in.
Very.
The problem with doing away with the dollar is that various people have come up with sort of different schemes and all the rest of it, a new trade settlement currency. But when you actually look at these schemes, there are two things about it which are completely wrong. The first is they're trying to embody things like blockchains and digital, central bank digital currencies and all the rest of it. That's the first thing, which is completely unnecessary and confusing. That's actually not going to cut any ice at all and isn't actually to the point. And the second thing is that it's quite clear that the people who put together these sort of schemes have no idea about the accounting of banks and the creation of bank credit. They really just do not understand the relationship between money, which is legally gold, to a lesser extent silver and copper, and credit. Now, what is interesting is that Russia has struggled very, very hard to try and get something together. It tried to get a new gold-backed, and I put that very loosely in inverted commas, currency on the agenda in Johannesburg last year, and failed to do it. And it was opposed, I think, very strongly by India, who again has this problem. I mean, they've got business in the West and business in the East and all the rest of it, and a very, very heavy Western influence. I mean, the Bank of England, if you like, is consulted on the appointment of the governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Those old ties are still there, amazingly. So India had a problem with this, and China, as far as China was concerned, she was looking at this and thinking, well, if we have a gold-backed currency, then this is going to be bad for the dollar, bad for Western currencies, and is going to threaten our export markets. Upon which, in other words, China was signaling we're not ready for it, if you like. So, but we're 1 year on, and Russia has worked very, very hard with something like 200 meetings, seminars, whatever, all aimed at Brexit nations joining Brexit, nations on the list. I mean, something like, as you say, something like 140 or so turned up. Particularly big things like the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. But the actual list is probably a bit tighter. We're looking at about maybe 40 nations, but some of them very, very significant. Like Malaya, Indonesia, which is a very I mean, that's almost a G20. I think it is a G20 now.
I think so.
So there are some very, very serious players in there moving towards this grouping, as it were. Now, I mean, there's a journalist who I follow. I mean, everything he writes, I read because he is so informative, and that's Pepe Escobar. And he wrote an article, I think it was on the 26th of September, about China. And there was a throwaway paragraph down at the bottom of the article. And that is, it was something to the effect that they're now talking about a joint ruble, yuan, gold, new currency, BRICS currency. Now, this is very different because what we're no longer talking about is, sort of having, if you like, the unit type proposal, which was actually put up by a couple of fund managers. It looked like it was an official document. It wasn't. It was actually two fund managers who, as I say, don't actually understand credit, bank credit in particular. The point about the way this currency is going is it's no longer sort of 40% gold and the rest is a plethora of these currencies. What we're now looking at is gold, ruble, yuan. Now, the ruble should go on the gold standard immediately.
Mhm.
It would be of, I mean, bear in mind that their current interest rates, the Reserve Bank's rate is 18%, you know, and who would buy the ruble? No one, nobody would buy the ruble. So you can see that the ruble has got problems, but put it on, put it on a proper gold standard, then it's a different thing. Then what you will see is you will see the Russian banks going out and lifting gold out of Western markets where the lease rate is 2%, passing it over to the Russia's central bank where they get 18%. Now the point is 18% in a gold substitute, as good as gold. This is the whole point. So, that's what really, that's the role of an interest rate, not to try and manage the economy, but to manage the gold reserves. And once you get that message on board, you can see how Russia immediately would benefit, because what you would then get is you would then get a fall in the interest rates, because that 16% margin between the lease rate in the West and 18%, is just crazy. I mean,
Right.
gold would be flooding in. So they would reduce the rates. I think you'd find the rates would get down very, very quickly to something like 5 or 6% with price stability, because the ruble is then tied to gold. And this is the key thing. It's no longer a fiat currency. So, Sergei Glaziev has actually written about this, putting it almost in those terms. So, there are elements, if you like, at the top table in Russia that do actually understand the argument that I'm making. China has a problem. China knows that the end game for the dollar and for the Western financial system is its collapse. It has been buying gold ever since the People's Bank was appointed with that in mind back in 1983. And I've got the legislation translated in English. So it's all there. We know that. Now, since then, they were buying gold in a bear market. They have accumulated a lot of gold. My calculations looking at credit flows into and out of China, first of all, investment flows into China from the 80s onwards, and then gradually increasing into exports from the late 90s onwards. Looking at all those flows, by 2002, I reckon that China had accumulated over 20,000 tons secretly, hidden around various government accounts. Now, 2002 was when the Shanghai Gold Exchange was opened, and the Chinese citizens were then allowed to buy gold. Bear in mind also that China has encouraged gold mining. She very rapidly became the largest miner by output, gold miner by output, and is still the largest miner. Russia is now doing the same thing and is close second, if you like, with Australia. But you can see that going back, the Chinese knew that this was going to happen at some stage in the future, and they needed to protect themselves by having sufficient gold to protect their currency. So they're of the mindset for putting the yuan onto a gold standard. The question is when. Now, if you look at the situation with the dollar, with the refusal, and I don't care post-election that whether Harris or Trump is going to sort of change the story and say we've got to cut our spending. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is that you're going to look at higher deficits. You have got the debt limit being refixed on the 3rd. That's got to be agreed on the 3rd of January. I mean, if I was Trump, if I was Harris, I'd probably say, well, at the moment, we're looking at 35.5 trillion. How about 40? Why don't we make it 40? That will give me room to do what I want to do. I think that's the way that game is going to go.
Thank you for tuning in. Alastair Macleod's insights offer a powerful glimpse into the shifting dynamics of global finance and the potential reconfiguration of currency standards, especially around gold. As we see countries rethinking their reliance on the dollar and forming new alliances, it's clear that the future of global finance is evolving in unprecedented ways. Stay informed and stay connected with us for more updates on the forces shaping our financial landscape. Until next time.